Welcome back. I trust you've brought orchids, or at least a decent case. In the shadowed heart of Manhattan, where ambition weaves its silent webs, a single blueprint held the promise of glory and the seeds of ruin. It was October 1952, and the city thrummed with secrets, none darker than the one concealed within those intricate lines of ink and ambition. A man in a gray flannel suit, his hands trembling with fear, stepped into the night, unaware that his plea for help would unravel a tapestry of betrayal, where every line drawn led inexorably to murder. In the quiet of a brownstone on West 35th Street, Nero Wolfe, with his peerless mind, and Archie Goodwin, his sharp-eyed sentinel, stood poised to confront a puzzle that would test the limits of intellect and courage. A puzzle where the smallest flaw could bring a city to its knees. Chapter 1. The Man in the Gray Flannel Suit. The brownstone on West 35th Street stood as a fortress of routine, its 4 stories of weathered stone exuding an air of permanence against the restless pulse of Manhattan. It was October 1952, and the city was caught in the crisp grip of autumn, leaves skittering across the pavement like secrets whispered in a speakeasy. Inside, the evening was quiet, save for the faint clink of my glass as I poured a second whiskey from the bottle on the sideboard. The amber liquid caught the light from the office lamp, casting a warm glow across the room. I, Archie Goodwin, sat at my desk, restless as a cat in a rainstorm, waiting for something, anything, to break the monotony of the past week. Nero Wolfe, my employer, and the resident genius of this operation, was ensconced in his oversized chair behind the massive desk, his nose buried in a volume of Pliny, the Elders Naturalis Historia. The book was one of his latest obsessions, its pages yellowed and dog-eared, a testament to his relentless pursuit of knowledge when not unraveling the city's darker mysteries. His bulk, nearly 1/7 of a ton, seemed to anchor the room, as if gravity itself bent to accommodate him. The only sound from his corner was the occasional rustle of a page or a faint grunt of disapproval at some ancient Roman's botanical inaccuracies. In the kitchen, Fritz Brenner, our chef and household maestro, was working his magic. The air carried the tantalizing aroma of shallots and thyme, mingling with the promise of a dinner that would, as always, be a minor miracle. Fritz had been with us for years, his culinary wizardry as reliable as Wolfe's intellect or my own knack for getting into trouble. But tonight, even the prospect of his coq au vin couldn't shake the itch under my skin. I needed a case, something to sink my teeth into, something to make the blood hum. The doorbell chimed, a sharp intrusion into the stillness. I glanced at Wolfe, who didn't so much as twitch, his eyes fixed on Pliny, as if the fate of the world hung on a 2,000-year-old footnote. Sighing, I set down my glass and headed for the front door, my footsteps muffled on the thick Persian rug that lined the hall. The brownstone's entrance was a study in understated elegance, polished oak, brass fixtures, and a peephole that let me size up visitors before they crossed the threshold. I peered through it now, expecting a delivery boy or maybe one of Wolfe's orchid suppliers. Instead, I saw a man in a gray flannel suit, his hat clutched in nervous hands, his face pale as mimeograph paper under the dim glow of the street lamp. I opened the door, letting in a gust of cool air and the faint hum of city noise. Car horns, distant sirens, the pulse of Manhattan at dusk. The man looked up, startled, as if he hadn't expected the door to actually open. He was in his late 30s, with a lean frame and a face that might have been handsome if it weren't so. Drawn like a blueprint left too long in the sun. His eyes, a watery blue, darted past me into the hall, searching for something or someone. "Mr. Wolfe?" he asked, his voice tight, like a violin string about to snap. "Mr. Wolfe doesn't come to the door," I said, leaning against the frame. "I'm Archie Goodwin, his assistant." "You got a name, or should I guess?" He blinked, fumbling with his hat. "Harold Vance." "I'm an architect. I need to see Mr. Wolfe. It's urgent." "Everything's urgent at 8 o'clock at night," I said, but I stepped aside and gestured him in. "Come on, he's in the office, but don't expect him to stand up and shake hands. He's allergic to exercise." Vance followed me down the hall, his shoes squeaking faintly on the polished floor. I led him into the office, where Wolfe hadn't moved, his bulk a monument to inertia. The room was a sanctuary of order, bookshelves lined with tomes on everything from botany to criminology, a globe the size of a small planet, and the yellow chairs arranged for clients who rarely came. I motioned Vance to one of them and took my place at my desk, where I could keep an eye on him and still reach my whiskey. Wolfe marked his place with a silk bookmark, a gift from some grateful client, and looked up, his eyes narrowing as they took in Vance's jittery demeanor. "Mr. Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble, like distant thunder. "You have 10 minutes. State your problem." Vance sat, his hat now a crumpled mess in his lap. He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for a plunge into cold water. "Mr. Wolfe, I need your help. Someone's stolen my blueprints, designs for a new municipal building. They're worth millions, and if they fall into the wrong hands—" He trailed off, his eyes flicking to me, then back to Wolfe, as if unsure who posed the greater threat. Wolfe leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight, and steepled his fingers. "Describe these blueprints, Mr. Vance." And why they're worth killin' for Vance flinched at the word killin', and I caught the first whiff of real trouble. This wasn't just about stolen paper. I leaned forward, pen poised over my notebook, ready to catch every detail. Vance swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing like a buoy in a storm. "The blueprints are for a civic center," he said. "A revolutionary design, steel and glass, a labyrinth of public spaces meant to redefine Manhattan's skyline. It's a project the city's been fighting over for years. My firm, Vance and Crane, won the contract, but—" He hesitated, his fingers tightening on his hat. "There's a secret in the plans, something nobody was supposed to know." Wolfe's eyebrows lifted a fraction, a rare sign of interest. "A secret?" Vance nodded, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "A structural flaw, deliberately encoded in the design. If the building's constructed without certain corrections only I know how to make, it could collapse. Thousands could die." I let out a low whistle, earning a glare from Wolfe. He didn't like theatrics, but I couldn't help it. This was no small-time swindle, a collapsing skyscraper. That was front-page stuff, the kind of scandal that could bury a man or a city. "Who else knows about this flaw?" Wolfe asked, his tone sharp. "Only my partner, Leonard Crane," Vance said. "And maybe someone at Pinnacle Designs, our main rival. They've been sniffing around the project, trying to undercut us. I think they stole the blueprints to expose the flaw, or worse, to use it." Wolfe's eyes narrowed, a glint of curiosity breaking through his usual mask of indifference. "You've omitted something, Mr. Vance." "What?" Vance's face went from pale to ghostly. He licked his lips, his eyes darting to the door as if he might bolt. "Crane, my partner. He vanished 2 days ago. I haven't heard from him since. I think he's involved. Or dead." The room fell silent, the only sound the faint tick of the grandfather clock in the corner. Wolfe leaned back, his chair groaning again, and studied Vance like a botanist examining a rare specimen. I could almost hear the gears turning in that massive brain of his, piecing together the puzzle before we'd even seen all the edges. "Very well," Wolfe said at last. "Archie, take Mr. Vance's retainer. We'll investigate." I stood, motioning Vance to follow me to the safe, where we kept the cash and the occasional piece of evidence too hot to leave lying around. He handed over a check. $5,000, a hefty sum for a man who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. I showed him out, his relief palpable as he stepped back into the night, his gray flannel suit blending into the shadows. As I locked the door, I felt the first stirrings of a case that would tangle us in a web of deceit as intricate as any blueprint. Back in the office, Wolfe had returned to Pliny, but I knew he was already working the problem, his mind a labyrinth of its own. I poured another whiskey, settled at my desk, and started typing up notes. The city was full of secrets, and Harold Vance had just handed us one wrapped in a bow. The next morning I was up before Wolfe, which wasn't hard since he rarely stirred before 11 unless orchids or murder were involved. Fritz was in the kitchen, humming a tune from his native Switzerland as he prepared breakfast, sausages, eggs, and a stack of pancakes that could have doubled as a skyscraper. I ate alone, Wolfe still upstairs in his greenhouse, communing with his orchids. Theodore, our resident horticulturist, was up there with him, probably muttering about aphids or soil pH. By 10, I was out the door, headed for Pinnacle Designs' office in Midtown. If Vance was right about their involvement, I needed to get a read on them. The office was a sleek affair, all chrome and smoked glass, a testament to the kind of money that flows when architects dream big. The receptionist, a sharp-eyed woman named Clara, with hair like a raven's wing, gave me the once-over as I strolled in, my press pass from the Gazette dangling like a fishing lure. "Archie Goodwin, the Gazette," I said, flashing a grin. "I'm doing a piece on the Civic Center project." "Mind if I ask you a few questions?" She arched an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Mister, Heller's busy. You'll need an appointment." Marcus Heller was Pinnacle's head honcho, a name I'd heard in connection with every major building project in the city. I leaned on the desk, lowering my voice. "Come on, Clara." "Just a few minutes. I hear Pinnacle's got big plans for the Civic Center. Maybe bigger than Vance and Crane's?" Her eyes flickered, a tell as clear as a neon sign. "I don't know anything about that," she said, but her fingers tightened on her pen. "Mister, Heller's out of town," I pressed, keeping my tone light. "Funny, I heard he was seen with Leonard Crane last week. Know anything about that?" She froze, just for a second, but it was enough. "I don't keep Mister Heller's calendar," she said, her voice flat. "You'll have to call back." I left, but not before slipping her my card. Archie Goodwin, private investigator, not Gazette reporter. She'd figure it out, and maybe she'd talk. People always do, given time and the right push. My next stop was Crane's apartment on the Lower East Side, a walk-up in a building that looked like it hadn't seen a paintbrush since the Depression. The lock was flimsy, and I let myself in with a trick I'd learned from a less than reputable acquaintance. The place was a shambles, drawers yanked open, papers strewn across the floor like confetti at a ticker-tape parade. Someone had been here, and they weren't looking for loose change. I sifted through the mess, finding little of value until I spotted a crumpled note in the wastebasket. It was written in a precise, draftsman-like hand. "Meet me at the archive, 9 p.m., bring the key." No signature, no date, but it was a lead. The archive, I learned later from a quick call to Lon Cohen at the Gazette, was the Municipal Records Building near City Hall, a dusty mausoleum of city documents where blueprints and permits went to gather cobwebs. It was the kind of place you'd pick for a clandestine meet, dark, labyrinthine, and forgotten by everyone except the rats. I headed back to the brownstone, my mind buzzing. Wolfe was in the office now, nursing a beer and a scowl, his morning ritual of orchid tending complete. I laid out what I'd found, Clara's slip about Heller and Crane, the trashed apartment, the note about the archive. He listened, his face impassive, but I knew he was filing every detail in that steel trap mind of his. "The key," he said when I finished, "intrigues me. It suggests a literal or metaphorical lock, perhaps to the blueprint secret. Visit this archive tonight, Archie. Observe, but do not engage." I nodded, grabbing my hat. The case was heating up, and I had a hunch the archive held more than old tax records. As I headed out, I glanced back at Wolfe, who was already reaching for his book. Pliny could wait. This was about to get interesting. The Municipal Records Building loomed like something out of a Bogart flick, its granite facade swallowed by shadows as I approached at 8:45 p.m. The street was quiet, the city's pulse muted here in the shadow of City Hall. I slipped inside through a side door, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air was thick with the smell of mildew and bureaucracy, the kind of place where secrets went to die or be reborn. Rows of filing cabinets stretched into the darkness, their labels faded to near illegibility. I moved silently, my footsteps muffled by years of dust. At 9 p.m. sharp, a figure emerged from the shadows. A woman, tall and angular, her face obscured by a scarf. She moved with purpose, unlocking a basement door with a small brass key. I followed, keeping my distance, my heart thy system, pounding in my ears. The basement was a maze of crates and blueprints, some dating back to the 19th century. She stopped at a locked cabinet, produced another key, and extracted a roll of papers. Suddenly, a second figure appeared, a man, heavyset, with a fedora pulled low. I caught a glimpse of his face, Marcus Heller. They argued in whispers, something about the flaw and Crane's cut. Then a muffled thud, a silencer. The woman crumpled. I froze, my breath catching. Heller rolled up the papers and vanished into the shadows. I checked the woman, dead, a single bullet to the chest. Her scarf had slipped, revealing Evelyn Starr, a city councilwoman with a reputation for clean hands. Until now. I called Inspector Kramer from a payphone, keeping it anonymous. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting, his eyes glinting with curiosity. "Tell me everything, Archie." I recounted the scene, and he leaned back, fingers steepled. "This is no mere theft, Archie. The flaw is the key, not just to a building, but to a conspiracy. We must find Mr. Crane. I nodded, already planning my next move. The archive had given up one secret, but I knew there were more buried in this case, waiting to be unearthed. Chapter 2. The Architect's Shadow. The morning after the archive murder, Manhattan woke to a gray drizzle that turned the streets into a mirror of the city's underbelly, slick, cold, and unforgiving. I was up early, the taste of Fritz's coffee lingering as I stepped out of the brownstone on West 35th Street. Nero Wolfe was still upstairs in his greenhouse, fussing over his orchids with Theodore, no doubt debating the merits of a hybrid phalaenopsis. Me, I had work to do. Harold Vance's story about stolen blueprints and a missing partner had hooked me, and Evelyn Starr's death in the Municipal Records Building had raised the stakes. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a puzzle wrapped in a shroud, and I was itching to unravel it. My first stop was Pinnacle Designs' office in Midtown, a gleaming monument to ambition with its chrome trim and smoked glass windows. The place screamed money, the kind that flows when architects play chess with city contracts. I'd been here yesterday, posing as a Gazette reporter, and gotten a nibble from Clara, the receptionist with eyes sharper than a draftsman's pencil. She'd let slip that Marcus Heller, Pinnacle's head, had been seen with Leonard Crane before Crane vanished. That was enough to bring me back, this time as myself. Archie Goodwin, private investigator, no press pass required. The lobby was quiet, save for the soft clack of Clara's typewriter. She looked up as I approached, her dark hair pinned back, her expression a mix of wariness and curiosity. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, before I could open my mouth. "No Gazette today?" I grinned, leaning on the counter. "Just me, Clara." "No aliases. I need to talk about Leonard Crane. You mentioned he was with Heller last week. Care to elaborate?" Her fingers paused on the keys, and for a moment I thought she'd clam up. Then she sighed, glancing toward the closed door of Heller's office. "You're digging into something dangerous, you know that?" "Occupational hazard," I said. "Spill it." "What's the deal with Crane and Heller?" She lowered her voice, her eyes flicking to the door again. "Crane came here about 10 days ago. He was nervous, kept looking over his shoulder. He met with Mr. Heller behind closed doors. I didn't hear much, but I caught something about the plans and a deal. Crane left in a hurry, and Heller was in a foul mood after." "Any idea where Crane went?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, but Heller's been acting strange since. Burning papers in his office late at night, taking calls he doesn't want me to hear. And yesterday he left early, said he had a meeting downtown." "Downtown?" The archive was downtown. I filed that away, along with the image of Heller in the basement, standing over Evelyn Starr's body. "Thanks, Clara," I said, sliding her my card again. "If you hear from Crane, or Heller gets twitchier, give me a call." She took the card, her fingers brushing mine, and I caught a flicker of something in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or guilt. I didn't push. She'd talk when she was ready, or I'd find another way to crack her. My next move was Crane's apartment on the Lower East Side, a 5-story walk-up that looked like it was held together by grit and despair. I'd been here yesterday, but the trash state of the place warranted a second look. The lock was still a joke, and I let myself in, the air heavy with the stale smell of cigarette smoke and neglect. The place was as I'd left it, Drawers yanked open, papers scattered like leaves in a storm. Whoever had tossed it had been thorough but sloppy, missing the crumpled note I'd found in the wastebasket. "Meet me at the archive, 9 p.m. Bring the key." I searched again, slower this time, checking under furniture, behind baseboards, anywhere a desperate man might hide something. In the bedroom, tucked inside the lining of a torn mattress, I found a photograph. Crane, smiling, arm around a woman with sharp cheekbones and a scarf tied loosely around her neck. Evelyn Starr. The photo was dated a year ago, taken at some charity gala, according to the caption scribbled on the back. So Crane and Starr knew each other, well enough to pose together at least. That tied them closer than Vance had let on. I pocketed the photo and kept looking. In the kitchen, I found a receipt from a diner on Vesey Street, dated 3 days ago. It was for 2 coffees and a slice of pie, paid in cash. Crane hadn't been alone, and Vesey was a stone's throw from the archive. I made a mental note to check the diner later. Back at the brownstone, I found Wolfe in the office, nursing a beer and staring at a map of Manhattan he'd spread across his desk. His eyes flicked up as I entered, taking in my expression. "Report, Archie," he said, his voice a low rumble. I laid it out. Clara's story about Crane and Heller, the trashed apartment, the photo of Crane and Starr, the diner receipt. I handed him the note about the archive, which he studied with the intensity of a man deciphering hieroglyphs. "The key," he said, tapping the paper. "It's central. A literal key, perhaps, to a lockbox or safe. Or metaphorical, a code, a secret that unlocks the blueprint's true purpose. The archive is the nexus. What did you observe there last night, beyond the murder?" I thought back to the basement, the crates, the locked cabinet. Starr had a key to the basement door and another for the cabinet. She was after something specific, a roll of papers. Heller took them after he shot her. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Papers, not blueprints?" "I couldn't tell," I admitted. "They were rolled up, but they looked thinner than blueprints." "Documents, maybe." He leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "Miss Starr's involvement complicates matters. A councilwoman with a reputation for integrity, yet entangled with Crane and, indirectly, Heller. We need her connections. Call Mr. Cohen at the Gazette. Find out what she was working on before her death." I nodded, heading for the phone. Lon Cohen, my go-to for city gossip, picked up on the second ring. "Archie, you owe me a steak dinner for the last tip," he said, his voice crackling with amusement. "Put it on my tab," I said. "What do you know about Evelyn Starr? Her projects, her enemies?" Lon didn't miss a beat. "Starr was a crusader, clean government, no corruption. She was pushing hard for the Civic Center project, said it'd be a legacy for the city. But she was digging into Pinnacle Designs' finances, something about shady bids on past projects. Word is, she had dirt on Heller, enough to make him sweat. She was also tight with the mayor's office, which didn't sit well with some of the old guard on the council." "Any link to Leonard Crane?" I asked. "Not that I've heard, but if she was sniffing around Pinnacle, she'd have crossed paths with Vance and Crane. Those 2 firms have been at each other's throats for years." I thanked him and hung up, relaying the info to Wolfe. He listened, his fingers steepled, his eyes half closed, a sign he was chewing on something big. "Miss Starr was a threat," he said at last, "not just to Heller, but to whoever benefits from the blueprint secret. We must assume Crane is alive, hiding, and complicit. Complicit in what? I asked. Betrayal, Wolfe said simply. He knows the flaw's purpose. Perhaps he engineered it, or he plans to exploit it. Send Saul Panzer to tail Mr. Heller. I want to know his movements, his contacts. Saul, our best operative, was already on speed dial. I gave him the rundown, and he promised to have eyes on Heller by noon. Meanwhile, I had my own lead to chase, the diner on Vesey Street. It was a long shot, but long shots were my specialty. The diner was a greasy spoon called Marty's, its neon sign flickering like a dying star. The lunchtime crowd was thin, just a few cabbies and a couple of city clerks nursing coffee. The waitress, a wiry woman with a name tag reading Marge, looked like she'd seen every sob story in the book. I ordered a coffee and slid her a 10, along with a description of Crane. Yeah, I remember him, she said, pocketing the bill. Came in a few days ago, looked like he hadn't slept in a month. He was with a woman, dark hair, fancy scarf. They argued, kept their voices low. Something about the key and not trusting Vance. He paid and left, said he was heading downtown. Downtown again, the archive. I thanked Marge and stepped back into the drizzle, my mind racing. Crane and Starr at the diner, talking about a key. Starr dead in the archive, Heller with the papers, and Vance sweating in his office, claiming ignorance. The pieces were there, but they didn't fit. Not yet. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was finishing his lunch, Fritz's coq au vin, judging by the aroma. I gave him the update, and he nodded, his eyes glinting with that rare spark of excitement. The key, Archie, he said. Find what it unlocks, and we'll find Mr. Crane. Return to the archive tonight. Search that cabinet. But be cautious. Heller may not be the only predator in this jungle. I grabbed my coat and hat, the weight of my .38 reassuring in its holster. The archive was calling again, and I had a feeling its shadows held more than dust and secrets. As I stepped into the rain, I couldn't shake the image of Evelyn Starr's face, lifeless on the basement floor. This case was personal now, and I wasn't about to let it slip through my fingers. Chapter 3. The Archive's Secrets. The Municipal Records Building stood like a forgotten relic, its granite facade swallowed by the inky shadows of Manhattan's night. The drizzle from earlier had thickened into a steady rain, drumming against my hat as I approached the side entrance at 8:45 p.m. The city's pulse was muted here, near City Hall, where the streets felt like a stage set for a noir film, all wet pavement and flickering streetlights. I'd been here last night, witnessing Evelyn Starr's murder, and the memory clung to me like the damp air. Tonight, I was back to dig deeper, armed with my flashlight, a lockpick set, and Nero Wolfe's orders to search the basement cabinet without getting myself killed. The side door was still unlocked, a careless oversight by whoever passed for security in this bureaucratic tomb. I slipped inside, the air heavy with the musty scent of mildew and old paper. The main hall was a cavern of filing cabinets, their metal surfaces glinting faintly under my flashlight's beam. Rows stretched into the darkness, labeled with faded tags, tax records, building permits, city ordinances, all the detritus of a metropolis's history. I moved silently, my footsteps muffled by the dust that coated the floor like a second skin. The basement door was where I'd seen Starr last night, unlocking it with a small brass key. I tested the handle, still open, another sign of sloppiness, The stairs descended into a deeper gloom, the air growing colder, thicker, as if the building itself was holding its breath. At the bottom, I found the maze of crates and rolled blueprints I'd glimpsed before, stacked haphazardly like the bones of forgotten dreams. The cabinet Star had opened stood against the far wall, its lock gleaming in the flashlight's glow. I crouched, examining the lock. It was a standard pin tumbler, nothing fancy, but the scratches around the keyhole suggested recent use. Maybe Heller, maybe someone else. I pulled out my lockpicks, a gift from a less than savory acquaintance in my pre-Wolfe days, and went to work. The tumblers clicked into place, and the door swung open with a faint creak. Inside were more rolls of paper, but not blueprints, documents typed and handwritten, some yellowed with age, others crisp and new. I unrolled one, a city contract for a 1940s housing project, stamped with Pinnacle Designs logo. Another was a memo, dated last month, detailing zoning disputes for the Civic Center project. Nothing screamed secret flaw, but I pocketed a few pages that mentioned Vance and Crane and Pinnacle. Evidence was evidence, even if it didn't yet fit the puzzle. Before I could dig deeper, a noise, a soft scrape, like a shoe on concrete, came from behind a stack of crates. I killed the flashlight and crouched, my hand on the .38 in my shoulder holster. The basement was a labyrinth, and I wasn't alone. Another scrape, closer now. I eased toward the sound, keeping low, my pulse steady but loud in my ears. A figure emerged at 9 p.m. sharp, moving with the precision of someone who knew the terrain. Tall, angular, cloaked in a dark coat, her face half hidden by a scarf. Not Star, she was dead, but the resemblance in her movements was uncanny. She approached the cabinet, unaware of me, and produced a key identical to the one Star had used. She opened the same door, her hand steady as she rifled through the contents. I was about to step out when another figure appeared, heavy-set, fedora pulled low. Marcus Heller, no question. The beam of his flashlight caught the woman's scarf, and I saw her face for a split second. Sharp cheekbones, eyes wide with alarm. Heller grabbed her arm, his voice a harsh whisper. "Where's the key, Clara?" Crane said, "You had it, Clara," the receptionist from Pinnacle Designs. So she wasn't just a bystander, she was in this up to her neck. She jerked free, her voice low but defiant. "I don't have it." "Crane lied to you. Don't play games," Heller growled. "The flaw's in those plans, and if the city finds out before we do, we're finished." "Where's Crane?" "He's gone," she hissed. "You think I'd be here if I knew where he was?" Heller raised a hand, and I saw the glint of a gun, a silenced pistol, like the one that killed Star. My grip tightened on my .38, but before I could act, Clara twisted away, knocking over a crate. The crash echoed like a gunshot in the confined space. Heller cursed, his flashlight beam swinging wildly as he lunged for her. She darted into the maze of crates, and he followed, his footsteps heavy. I had a choice: chase them or secure the cabinet. Wolfe's voice echoed in my head. "Observe, do not engage." I stayed put, moving quickly to the cabinet. I grabbed the remaining documents, stuffing them into my coat, and relocked the door. Whatever Clara and Heller were after, I had part of it now. I slipped back upstairs, avoiding the main hall where a night watchman might finally decide to do his job. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy and cold. I hoofed it to a payphone 2 blocks away, my breath fogging in the night air. I called Inspector Kramer, keeping my voice low and anonymous. "There's been a disturbance at the Municipal Records Building. Basement. You'll want to check it out." I hung up before he could ask questions. Kramer would find nothing but an empty basement and a toppled crate, but it might spook Heller and Clara into making a mistake. I headed back to the brownstone, the documents crinkling in my coat, my mind racing with questions. Clara's presence at the archive tied her to Starr's murder, and Heller's mention of the key matched the note from Crane's apartment. But what was the key, and why was Crane still a ghost? Wolfe was in the office when I returned, sipping a beer and staring at the globe as if it held the answers to the universe. The room was warm, the fire in, the hearth casting a soft glow across the bookshelves. I laid the documents on his desk, along with my report of the night's events. Clara, Heller, the argument, the gun. He scanned the papers, his eyes moving with the precision of a draftsman. "Contracts, memos, nothing explicit about the flaw," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Yet Miss Starr died for something in this basement, and Miss Clara risks the same. The key is not merely physical, it unlocks a truth. Mr. Crane's disappearance is no coincidence." "What about Heller?" I asked. "He's got a gun and a temper." "You think he killed Starr?" "Possibly," Wolfe said, leaning back, the chair groaning. "But his desperation suggests he's a pawn, not the mastermind. Mr. Crane is the architect of this conspiracy, or at least its catalyst. We need his whereabouts." I nodded, thinking of the diner receipt from Vesey Street. "I've got a lead, a diner where Crane was seen with a woman, probably Starr, days before she died. I'll check it tomorrow." "Do so," Wolfe said, "and send Saul to watch Miss Clara. Her role is unclear, accomplice or victim. We must know which." I called Saul Panzer, our best operative, and gave him Clara's address in Chelsea. He'd tail her, quiet as a shadow, and report back by morning. As I hung up, Wolfe was already back to his globe, spinning it slowly, his mind no doubt mapping the city's secrets as surely as any blueprint. I poured a whiskey and sat at my desk, typing up notes. The archive had given up a piece of the puzzle, but it was a jagged one, cutting deeper the more I turned it over. Clara's fear, Heller's gun, Crane's absence, they all pointed to a conspiracy bigger than a stolen blueprint. And somewhere in the shadows of this city, Leonard Crane was either pulling the strings or running for his life. Chapter 4. Wolfe's Hypothesis. The brownstone on West 35th Street was a haven of order amid the chaos of Manhattan, its routines as unyielding as the stone facade. It was the morning after my second visit to the Municipal Records Building, and the city outside was stirring under a pale sun that did little to chase away the chill. I had returned late the previous night, documents from the basement cabinet tucked safely in my coat, and briefed Nero Wolfe on the encounter between Clara and Marcus Heller. Now, as Fritz served breakfast, poached eggs on toast with a side of sausages, I sat in the kitchen, nursing coffee and mulling over the pieces of this increasingly tangled puzzle. Wolfe descended from his greenhouse ritual at 11 sharp, his bulk filling the office doorway like a mountain claiming its territory. He settled into his chair with a sigh, the custom-built seat accommodating him without protest. I followed, laying out the pilfered documents on his desk alongside my typed report. He scanned them methodically, his eyes moving with the precision of a scholar dissecting an ancient text. "These are ancillary," he said at last, pushing the papers aside. "Contracts and memos that skirt the edges of the conspiracy but do not pierce its heart. Miss Clara's appearance at the archive, however, is illuminating. She is no mere receptionist. She holds a thread in this web." I nodded, recalling her defiant whisper to Heller. She mentioned Crane lying about the key. And Heller's desperate for it, whatever it is. Wolfe steepled his fingers, his eyes half closed in concentration. "Archie, this is no mere theft of blueprints. The blueprints are a MacGuffin, a pretext to divert attention. The true motive lies in the flaw itself. Why encode a structural weakness deliberately? And why kill to protect or expose it? The answers orbit Mr. Crane's vanishing and Miss Starr's death." He paused, reaching for the beer Fritz had brought on a tray. The foam settled as he sipped, his mind clearly elsewhere. "Consider the players, Mr. Vance, professing innocence yet withholding truths. Mr. Heller, aggressive and fearful, wielding a gun. Miss Clara, entangled yet evasive. And Mr. Crane, the absent architect, whose shadow looms largest." I leaned back in my chair, the yellow one reserved for me. "So, what's your hypothesis?" Wolfe's eyes opened fully, fixing on me with that rare intensity. "The flaw is not sabotage, but leverage. Mr. Vance designed it as a failsafe, to ensure his firm's continued involvement in the project, extracting fees for corrections. But Mr. Crane discovered a greater opportunity, to sell the secret to Pinnacle Designs, allowing them to undercut Vance and Crane and claim the contract." "That explains Crane meeting Heller," I said. "And Starr?" "She was digging into Pinnacle's finances per Lon Cohen." "Precisely," Wolfe said. "Miss Starr uncovered the scheme, perhaps, through her connection to Crane. The photograph you found suggests familiarity, if not intimacy. She confronted him or Heller and paid with her life. The key is literal, a device or code that accesses the encoded flaw in the blueprints." I thought back to the note in Crane's wastebasket. The meeting at the archive was about exchanging the key. But who set it up? "Mr. Crane, likely," Wolfe replied. "He arranged to meet Starr, but Heller intervened, or was tipped off. Miss Clara's role, perhaps she is Crane's confidant, or a double agent for Heller." The phone rang, and I answered. It was Saul Panzer, his voice steady as always. "Archie, I've got eyes on Heller. He left his office this morning, headed to a warehouse on the docks. Looked nervous, kept checking his watch. I followed. He met with a couple of goons, handed over an envelope. They nodded and split. Heller's back at Pinnacle now, burning more papers in his fireplace." "Good work, Saul," I said. "Stay on him." "Anything on Clara?" "She's at her apartment in Chelsea," Saul said. "Hold up, blinds drawn, no visitors." I relayed the info to Wolfe, who nodded approvingly. "The envelope suggests payment, hush money, or a bribe. The warehouse merits investigation. Go there, Archie, discreetly. Ascertain its purpose." I grabbed my hat and coat, the .38 a comforting weight. The docks were a world away from the brownstone civility, a gritty expanse of piers and warehouses where the Hudson met the city's underbelly. The warehouse Saul mentioned was a rusting hulk labeled import storage, its doors guarded by a chain-link fence. I parked a block away and approached on foot, blending into the shadows of stacked crates. The goons Saul described were there, lounging by a side door, smoking and laughing. One was burly, with a scar across his cheek, the other lean with a weasel's eyes. I circled, finding a loose panel in the fence, and slipped inside. The warehouse was dimly lit, filled with crates marked for construction materials, steel beams, cement bags, all destined for some building site. In a back office, I overheard them. "Heller's payment came through," Scarface said. "Now we wait for Crane to show." Weasel chuckled. "If he don't, we torch the place." No blueprints, no problem blueprints. So this was a drop point, or a hideout. I backed away, careful not to disturb anything, and headed back to the brownstone. Wolfe was in the dining room, savoring Fritz's lunch, a rack of lamb with mint sauce. I joined him, reporting my findings over the meal. "The warehouse is key," Wolfe said, dabbing his lips with a napkin. "Mister, Crane intends to retrieve or deliver something there. We must anticipate him. Call Mr. Panzer. Have him stake it out. If Crane appears, detain him. Saul was on it within the hour." Meanwhile, I dug into Evelyn Starr's connections, phoning Lon Cohen again. "Archie."
"You're burning through favors," Lon said. "What now?" "Starr's clashes with Pinnacle," I said. "Details." Lon paused, rustling papers. "She was vocal against their zoning bids, called them corrupt in committee meetings, had evidence of kickbacks to council members. And get this, she was seen arguing with Vance at a City Hall function last month. Something about the Civic Center's design flaws, Vance arguing with Starr. That was new. I thanked Lon and hung up, adding it to my notes. Wolfe, back in the office, listened as I updated him. "Mister, Vance is more involved than he admits," Wolfe said. "His silence is a shield. Summon him here tomorrow. We shall press him." The rest of the day passed in a haze of phone calls and legwork. By evening, Saul reported no sign of Crane at the warehouse, but the goons were still there, waiting. I typed up more notes, the clack of the typewriter, a rhythmic counterpoint to the city's distant hum. As night fell, Wolfe retired to his orchids, but his hypothesis lingered in my mind, a web of greed, betrayal, and hidden flaws, with Crane at its center. The puzzle was taking shape, but one wrong move could bring it crashing down, like a skyscraper built on sand. Chapter 5. The Flaw in the Plan. The brownstone on West 35th Street was a fortress of calm, its routines a bulwark against the chaos of Manhattan's intrigues. It was the morning after my warehouse reconnaissance, and the city outside was cloaked in a fog that mirrored the murkiness of our case. Breakfast was Fritz's usual triumph, French toast with maple syrup and crisp bacon. But I ate quickly, eager to get moving. Nero Wolfe, still upstairs with his orchids, wouldn't descend until 11, leaving me time to plan my next step. Harold Vance's blueprints, Leonard Crane's disappearance, Evelyn Starr's murder, and Marcus Heller's desperation were threads in a tapestry I was determined to unravel. By 10, I was on my way to Vance's office, a cluttered loft in a converted warehouse near the Flatiron District. The place was a draftsman's dream, tables strewn with blueprints, T-squares and pencils, the air thick with cigarette smoke and the faint tang of ink. Vance was there, hunched over a drafting table, his eyes bloodshot and his tie askew. He looked like a man who hadn't slept since our last meeting, his gray flannel suit now rumpled as if it had become a second skin. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, startled, as I strolled in unannounced. "Any news on Crane? Or the blueprints?" "Maybe," I said, leaning against a table, careful not to disturb a half-finished sketch.
But first, let's talk about the flaw in your civic center design. You said it was deliberate, a fail-safe. I need the full story, no omissions. Vance's face paled, and he stubbed out his cigarette with a trembling hand. I told you everything. The flaw ensures the city needs my firm to oversee construction. Without our corrections, the building's foundation would buckle under stress. It's a precaution that could kill thousands if it leaks, I said, keeping my tone even. Who else knew about it? Crane? Starr? He hesitated, his eyes darting to the window as if expecting someone to be watching. Crane knew, of course. He's my partner. We designed it together. Starr. She was asking questions, poking into the project specs. I told her it was proprietary, but she was relentless. Relentless enough to get herself killed? I asked. Vance flinched, his hands gripping the edge of the table. I didn't. Look, I don't know what happened to her. But if Crane's gone, maybe he's behind it. He's always been ambitious, pushing for bigger contracts, bigger risks. I studied him, noting the sweat beading on his forehead. He was scared, but whether of exposure or something worse, I couldn't tell. You argued with Starr at a City Hall function last month, I said, recalling Lon Cohen's tip. What was that about? His eyes widened, then narrowed. Who told you that? Yes, we argued. She accused me of cutting corners, said she had proof the design was flawed. I told her she was wrong, that she didn't understand the engineering. She wouldn't let it go. I filed that away. Starr's suspicions about the flaw matched her digging into Pinnacle Designs. Maybe she'd connected the dots between Vance, Crane, and Heller. One more thing, I said. Crane was seen at a diner with a woman, likely Starr, days before she died. They talked about a key. Any idea what it unlocks? Vance shook his head too quickly. No, Crane never mentioned a key. He handled the technical side, codes, specs. If there's a key, it's his doing. I left him to his sketches, unconvinced. Vance was holding back, and his fear was a neon sign pointing to guilt, or complicity. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office, a beer in hand, poring over city contracts I'd pulled from the archive. I reported my conversation with Vance, emphasizing his cagey answers and Starr's accusations. Wolfe leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. Mister, Vance is a poor liar, he said. His flaw is a blackmailer's tool, but he underestimates its reach. Mr. Crane, I suspect, saw its potential, not just to secure the contract, but to sell it to the highest bidder. Miss Starr's death suggests she threatened that plan. He pointed to a contract on his desk, a dense document riddled with legalese. This is revealing. Pinnacle Designs holds a secondary bid on the Civic Center project, activated if Vance and Crane fail to deliver. Mr. Heller stands to gain if Mr. Vance's firm collapses under scandal. So Heller kills Starr to keep her quiet, grabs the blueprints, and exposes the flaw to tank Vance's bid? I asked. Possibly, Wolfe said. But, Mr. Crane's absence complicates the motive. He may have orchestrated the theft, using Heller as a cat's paw. We need his intentions. The phone rang, and I picked up. It was Saul Panzer, his voice calm but urgent. Archie, Heller's on the move again. Back to the warehouse, this time with a locksmith. They're opening a safe in the back office. I'm watching from across the street. Stay on him, I said. If Crane shows, grab him. I relayed Saul's update, and Wolfe's eyes gleamed. A safe. The key, perhaps. Return to the diner on Vesey Street, Archie. Confirm, mister. Crane's meeting with Miss Starr. The waitress may recall Marty's diner was as greasy as ever, its neon sign buzzing like a trapped fly. Marge, the waitress, was wiping down the counter when I walked in. I ordered coffee and slid her another 10, along with the photograph of Crane and Starr from his apartment. "Recognize them?" I asked. Marge squinted at the photo, then nodded. "Yeah, that's the guy from a few days ago. Nervous type. Kept checking the door. The woman was with him. Classy, but tense. They argued about a key, like I told you. She said something about not letting Heller win. He told her to keep it safe, whatever it was." "Did they leave together?" I asked. "No, she left first. He stayed, paid the bill, then made a call from the payphone out front. Seemed in a hurry. After that I thanked her and stepped outside, eyeing the payphone. It was a long shot, but I checked the coin return. Empty, of course. Back at the brownstone, I found Wolfe in the dining room, savoring Fritz's lunch, roast pheasant with a chestnut stuffing. I joined him, filling him in on Marge's story. "The key again," Wolfe said, dabbing his lips with a napkin. "Miss Starr was entrusted with it, perhaps by Mr. Crane, to protect or expose the flaw. Her death suggests she was betrayed by Crane?" I asked. "Or Mr. Heller acting on Crane's behalf," Wolfe said. "We need Mr. Vance here. His reticence is a liability. Arrange a meeting tomorrow, Archie. We shall confront him with the evidence." I nodded, making a note to call Vance. As I typed up the day's findings, the puzzle was taking shape. A deliberate flaw, a missing partner, a murdered councilwoman, and a key that tied them all together. But the picture was still incomplete, and I had a feeling the next piece would come at a cost. Chapter 6. The Key to the Puzzle. The brownstone on West 35th Street stood resolute against the gray dawn, its windows reflecting a city still half asleep. It was the morning after my visit to Marty's diner, and the fog outside had lifted, leaving a crisp October chill that sharpened the senses. Fritz was in the kitchen, the clatter of pans signaling another culinary masterpiece. Today, omelets with herbs and a side of grilled tomatoes. I ate quickly, my mind on the case. Harold Vance's evasive answers, Leonard Crane's disappearance, Evelyn Starr's murder, and the mysterious key that seemed to unlock more than just a cabinet. Nero Wolfe, still upstairs with his orchids, would expect a full report when he descended at 11, and I had work to do before then. Saul Panzer called at 9, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "Archie, Heller's back at the warehouse. He opened the safe last night with the locksmith, pulled out a small box, and left. I followed him to a hotel in Hell's Kitchen, sleazy place called the Regent. He's holed up there, room 312. Clara's still at her apartment, no movement." "Good work, Saul," I said. "Keep eyes on the hotel. If Crane shows, don't let him slip." I hung up, adding Heller's hotel hideout to my notes. The safe at the warehouse suggested the key wasn't just a metaphor, it was physical, tied to whatever Heller had retrieved. But why a hotel in Hell's Kitchen? It was a far cry from Pinnacle Designs' chrome and glass empire. I headed to the office, where the documents from the archive lay on my desk, their edges curling like secrets reluctant to be shared. I sifted through them again, hoping for a clue I'd missed. One memo caught my eye, a handwritten note buried in a stack of zoning reports. It was in Crane's precise script, the same as the note from his apartment. Key to safe in archive, Deliver to ES 9 p.m. ES Evelyn Starr. So Crane had entrusted her with the key, but for what? To protect the blueprint secret or to expose it? Wolfe entered at 11, his bulk settling into the chair with a familiar creak. I briefed him on Saul's report and the memo, laying out the connections. Crane's meeting with Starr at the diner, her death at the archive, Heller's gun, and now the safe at the warehouse. Wolfe listened, his eyes half closed, fingers steepled. The key, he said, is both literal and symbolic. It unlocks a safe, yes, but also the truth behind the flaw. Mr. Crane orchestrated a double game, entrusting Miss Starr with the key to gain her trust, while manipulating Mr. Heller to eliminate her. When she became a liability, I leaned forward. So, Crane's playing both sides? Vance and Heller? Precisely, Wolfe said, reaching for a beer. He designed the flaw, not Mr. Vance, to extort the city or sell it to Pinnacle. Miss Starr's investigation threatened to expose him, so he arranged her death using Mr. Heller's ambition as a weapon. It made sense, but we needed Crane. I called Vance, arranging for him to come to the brownstone tomorrow morning. He sounded rattled, his voice thin over the phone. "Any news on Crane?" he asked. "We're close," I said, keeping it vague. "Be here at 10. Next, I headed to Hell's Kitchen to check out the Regent Hotel. The place was a dive, its neon sign flickering like a drunk's promise. The lobby smelled of stale beer and despair, the clerk half asleep behind a counter littered with cigarette burns. I flashed a 20 and a smile. "Room 312. Who's staying there?" The clerk pocketed the bill, barely looking up. "Guy named Heller. Checked in last night, paid cash. Keeps to himself." "Any visitors?" I asked. "Nope, just him. In and out." I slipped outside, spotting Saul across the street, blending into the shadows. He nodded, confirming Heller was still inside. I didn't want to spook him yet, so I headed to Crane's last known haunt, a dive bar in Hell's Kitchen called the Rusty Anchor, a block from the Regent. If Crane was hiding, this was his kind of place. The bar was dim, its air thick with smoke and the sour tang of cheap whiskey. The bartender, a grizzled man with a face like weathered leather, eyed me as I ordered a bourbon. I slid him a 10 and Crane's description. "Seen this guy?" He squinted, then nodded. "Yeah, couple days ago. Looked spooked, muttering about blueprints and betrayal. Kept checking the door. Left with a woman, dark hair, sharp eyes. Think she works at that fancy architect firm Clara. So she'd met Crane here, not just at Pinnacle." I pressed him. "What did they talk about?" "Didn't hear much," he said, wiping a glass. "Something about a key and not trusting someone named Vance." She seemed nervous, kept looking around. I thanked him and stepped into the alley, the bourbon warming my gut but doing little for the chill in my bones. Clara was deeper in this than I'd thought, connected to Crane, Starr, and Heller. Was she playing her own game or caught in theirs? Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the dining room, savoring Fritz's lunch, veal cutlets with a lemon sauce. I joined him, laying out the bartender's story and the clerk's confirmation of Heller's hideout. Wolfe listened, his eyes glinting with that rare spark of satisfaction. "Miss Clara is pivotal," he said, dabbing his lips. "She bridges Mr. Crane and Mr. Heller, perhaps unwittingly. Her meeting with Mr. Crane suggests she holds the key, or knows its whereabouts. "What's our move?" I asked. "Confront Mr. Vance tomorrow," Wolfe said. "His reticence is a liability. Meanwhile, have Saul search the warehouse safe. If it contains the blueprints or the key, we'll have our leverage." I called Saul, giving him the green light to break into the warehouse after dark. He was the best, and if anyone could do it without leaving a trace, it was him. As I typed up my notes, the case was tightening like a noose. Crane was out there, pulling strings or running scared, and the key, whatever it was, held the answer to Starr's murder and the flaw's purpose. I poured a whiskey, the brownstones quiet, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in the city's shadows. Chapter 7. Clara's Confession. The brownstone on West 35th Street was a sanctuary of routine, its walls a bulwark against the city's chaos. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the office where I sat, sipping Fritz's coffee, strong enough to wake a coma patient. It was October 1952, and the air held a crisp edge that promised a colder day ahead. Last night's revelations at the Rusty Anchor had tightened the screws on our case. Leonard Crane's meeting with Clara, their talk of a key and betrayal, and Marcus Heller's hideout at the Regent Hotel. Nero Wolfe, still upstairs with his orchids, would descend soon, expecting answers. I had one stop to make first, Clara's apartment in Chelsea, to press her for the truth. I caught a cab to Chelsea, the city waking around me, newsboys hawking papers with headlines about Evelyn Starr's murder. The papers had no leads, just speculation, but I knew more than they did. Clara's building was a modest walk-up, its brick facade weathered but proud. I climbed to the third floor and knocked, my .38 tucked under my coat, just in case. Clara opened the door, her dark hair loose, her eyes red-rimmed and wary. She wore a simple dress, but the way she clutched a cigarette betrayed her nerves. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, her voice flat. "I figured you'd show up." "Mind if I come in?" I asked, not waiting for an answer. I stepped inside, the apartment small but tidy, with a faint scent of lavender and smoke. She shut the door, leaning against it as if to keep the world out. "What do you want?" she said, lighting another cigarette, her hands trembling. "The truth," I said, keeping my tone light but firm. "You met Leonard Crane at the Rusty Anchor a few days ago. You talked about a key and not trusting Vance. You were at the archive last night, looking for something in that cabinet, and Evelyn Starr's dead. Start talking, Clara, or I call Inspector Kramer and let him take over." Her eyes widened, and the cigarette paused halfway to her lips. For a moment, I thought she'd bolt, but she sank onto a worn sofa, exhaling a cloud of smoke. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll tell you what I know." She stubbed out the cigarette, her fingers fidgeting. "Crane came to me 2 weeks ago frantic. He said he'd hidden a copy of the Civic Center blueprints in the archive, said they had a flaw, something deliberate. He gave me a key to a safe there, told me to keep it safe. Said it was insurance in case things went wrong." "Insurance against what?" I asked, leaning forward. "Against Vance," she said. "Crane didn't trust him. Said Vance was planning to use the flaw to extort the city, make millions by fixing it during construction. But Crane had another plan. He was going to sell the blueprints to Heller, let Pinnacle expose the flaw, and take the contract." I nodded, Wolfe's hypothesis clicking into place. So Crane was double-crossing Vance. What about Starr? Clara's eyes darted away. Evelyn, she was onto it. She'd been digging into Pinnacle's bids, found out about the flaw through Crane. He thought he could trust her, gave her the key to the archive cabinet, said it held proof, documents showing the flaw's design. But she was going to the mayor with it to stop the project. And Hella? I pressed. Hella found out, she said, her voice cracking. Crane told him about the key, thinking it'd seal their deal. But Hella, he got paranoid, thought Star was going to ruin everything. I don't know if he killed her, but he was at the archive that night. I saw him. I leaned back, piecing it together. Clara's story matched the fragments we had, Crane's note, Star's death, Heller's gun. But one piece was missing. Where's Crane now? She shook her head, tears welling. Gone. He said he was leaving town after he gave me the key. Said it was too dangerous to stay. But I heard he's dead. Heller's goons were talking at the warehouse. Said they took care of him. I studied her, looking for a lie, but her fear seemed real. Why'd you go to the archive last night? To get the documents, she said. Crane told me to retrieve them if he didn't come back. I thought maybe I could use them, bargain with Heller to save myself. But he showed up, and you saw. I stood, satisfied for now. Stay put, Clara. Don't talk to Heller. I'll be in touch. She nodded, lighting another cigarette as I left. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office, a beer in hand. The city contract spread before him like a battlefield map. I laid out Clara's confession, every word, watching his face for that telltale glint of insight. He leaned back, the chair creaking. Miss Clara confirms our suspicions. Mr. Crane engineered the flaw, not for Mr. Vance's benefit, but to betray him. He used Miss Starr's idealism to hide the key, then betrayed her to Mr. Heller, who eliminated her. But Mr. Crane's fate remains unclear, dead or hiding. Clara heard Heller's goons say they took care of him, I said, but no body, no proof. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Then we assume he lives until proven otherwise. Mr. Heller's actions, burning papers, hiding in a hotel, suggest panic, not control. He fears exposure, or Mr. Crane's next move. We must draw them out. How? I asked. Bring Mr. Vance here tomorrow, Wolfe said. Confront him with Miss Clara's story. If he breaks, we may force Mr. Crane's hand, or Mr. Heller's. Meanwhile, have Mr. Panzer search the warehouse safe. Its contents may confirm the key's purpose. I called Saul, relaying Wolfe's orders. He was already staking out the warehouse, waiting for the goons to leave. As I hung up, Fritz announced lunch, stuffed mushrooms, and a salad with Roquefort dressing. I joined Wolfe in the dining room, the case turning over in my mind. Clara's confession had peeled back a layer, exposing Crane's betrayal and Heller's ruthlessness. But the key and Crane's whereabouts remained elusive, like shadows in a storm. As I typed up my notes that evening, the brownstone's quiet was a stark contrast to the city's underbelly, where secrets were currency and trust a luxury. We were closing in, but the next move would be a gamble, and I had a feeling the stakes were about to get higher. Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm. The brownstone on West 35th Street stood resolute, its warm lights a beacon against the pre-dawn chill of October 1952. The city outside was hushed, the streets slick with an early mist that clung to the pavement like a secret. Inside, the aroma of Fritz's coffee mingled with the faint musk of old books, grounding me as I prepared for a day that promised to tighten the noose around our case. Clara's confession had laid bare Leonard Crane's betrayal, Marcus Heller's ruthlessness, and the elusive key tying them to Evelyn Starr's murder. Nero Wolfe, still upstairs with his orchids, would descend soon, expecting me to have Harold Vance ready for a showdown. But first, I had a call to make. Saul Panzer rang at 7, his voice crisp despite the hour. "Archie, I got into the warehouse safe last night, found a small box, empty, but it had a false bottom. Underneath was a single sheet, a blueprint fragment. Looks like part of the Civic Center's foundation plan with annotations in Crane's handwriting. Could be the flaw's specs. I left it in place, took photos. Heller's goons are still hanging around." "Good work, Saul," I said. "Send the photos to the brownstone and keep eyes on the warehouse. If Crane shows, grab him," I hung up, adding Saul's find to my notes. The blueprint fragment was a breakthrough, proof that Crane had hidden something tangible, likely tied to the key. I called Harold Vance, catching him at his office. His voice was strained, like a man expecting bad news. "Mr. Goodwin, have you found Crane?" "Not yet," I said. "But Wolfe wants you at the brownstone at 10 sharp. Bring any documents you have on the Civic Center project. No excuses." He agreed, reluctance dripping from every word. I spent the next hour typing up Clara's confession and Saul's report, the typewriter's clack a steady rhythm against the morning's quiet. At 9, Fritz served breakfast, scrambled eggs with chives and smoked salmon, and I ate alone, Wolfe still upstairs, communing with his plants. Wolfe descended at 11, his bulk filling the office doorway like a storm cloud. He settled into his chair, the creak of the wood a familiar prelude to his focus. I handed him Saul's photos, grainy but clear enough to show Crane's precise annotations, calculations for a foundation joint, marked with a red asterisk and the word fail-safe. Wolfe studied them, his eyes narrowing. "This confirms Miss Clara's story," he said, setting the photos aside. "Mr. Crane encoded the flaw, not Mr. Vance. The key likely unlocks a safe containing the full blueprints or instructions to exploit the flaw. We shall confront Mr. Vance with this." The doorbell rang at 10 sharp. I ushered Vance into the office, his gray flannel suit now a wrinkled testament to his nerves. He sat in a yellow chair, clutching a briefcase, his eyes darting between me and Wolfe. Inspector Kramer arrived. Minutes later, uninvited but not unexpected, his cigar already fouling the air. Clara followed, escorted by Saul, her face pale but composed. Marcus Heller was the last, dragged in by Saul's insistence, his fedora askew and his scowl deep. The office was thick with tension, the air heavy with cigar smoke and suspicion. Wolfe leaned back, his hands resting on the desk, his presence commanding silence. "Gentlemen, Miss Clara," he began, his voice a low rumble, "we are here to untangle a conspiracy woven from greed, betrayal, and murder. The Civic Center blueprints are its facade. The true design is far darker." Vance shifted uncomfortably. Heller glared, his hand twitching as if missing his gun. Clara stared at the floor, her fingers knotted. Kramer chewed his cigar, impatient but listening. Wolfe continued, "Mr. Vance, you presented the stolen blueprints as your concern, claiming a deliberate flaw ensured your firm's control. But the flaw was not your creation. It was Mr. Crane's, a tool for blackmail or profit." Vance's face drained of color. "That's a lie. Crane and I designed it together." Silence, Wolfe cut in, his tone sharp. Miss Clara has confessed. Mr. Crane hid a blueprint fragment in a warehouse safe, annotated with the flaw's specifications. He entrusted a key to Miss Starr, intending to sell the secret to Mr. Heller, who would expose the flaw to secure the contract for Pinnacle Designs. Heller snorted. You've got no proof, Wolfe. Wolfe ignored him, producing Saul's photos. This fragment, found last night, bears Mr. Crane's handwriting. Miss Starr, investigating Pinnacle's corruption, learned of the flaw and threatened to expose it. She was killed for it. By you, Mr. Heller, in the archive. Heller lunged forward, but Kramer's hand on his shoulder stopped him. Sit down, Kramer growled. Let him finish. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. The question remains, where is Mr. Crane? I submit he is not dead, but hiding. He orchestrated this affair, manipulating Mr. Heller to eliminate Miss Starr while he vanished with the profits. Clara's head snapped up. He's dead, I heard Heller's men. A ruse, Wolfe said. Mr. Crane is cunning. He spread that rumor to disappear, perhaps to sell the blueprints elsewhere. But he will surface, drawn by greed or necessity. Kramer chewed his cigar harder. That's a hell of a theory, Wolfe. Got any evidence? Wolfe turned to me. Archie, call Mr. Panzer. Have him bring the warehouse evidence. I stepped to the phone, dialing Saul. Bring the photos and anything else from the warehouse. Wolfe's ready to close the net. Saul promised to be there in 20 minutes. The room fell silent, the weight of Wolfe's words settling like dust. Vance was sweating, Heller fuming, Clara trembling. Kramer's eyes flicked between them, sensing blood in the water. As we waited, Wolfe sipped his beer, unruffled. Patience, Inspector. The architect of this conspiracy will reveal himself, and when he does, we shall have our resolution. The tension held, a storm gathering in the brownstone's quiet, ready to break with the next revelation. Chapter 9. The Hidden Player. The brownstone's office on West 35th Street was a pressure cooker, the air thick with cigar smoke, suspicion, and the weight of Nero Wolfe's accusations. It was mid-morning, October 1952, and the mist outside had burned off, leaving a pale sun to illuminate Manhattan's restless streets. Inside, Harold Vance, Marcus Heller, Clara, and Inspector Kramer sat in a tense tableau, their faces a gallery of fear, anger, and defiance. Wolfe, ensconced behind his desk, commanded the room like a general surveying a battlefield, his bulk anchored by the custom chair that groaned faintly under him. I, Archie Goodwin, stood by the globe, ready to act on Wolfe's next move, the echo of his hypothesis, Crane as the mastermind, still ringing in my ears. Saul Panzer arrived within 20 minutes, as promised, his lean frame slipping into the office with the quiet efficiency of a shadow. He carried a manila envelope, its contents the photos of the blueprint fragment from the warehouse safe, along with a small notebook he'd found tucked behind a crate. He handed them to Wolfe, who examined them with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a flawed diamond. Mr. Panzer, Wolfe said, his voice a low rumble, described the notebook. Saul's eyes flicked to the assembled group, then back to Wolfe. It's Crane's. Handwritten notes, mostly technical, stress calculations, foundation specs, but there's a page with names, Starr, Heller, Vance, and someone listed as RT. Next to each, a dollar amount. Starr's had expose written beside it. Heller's said buy. Wolfe's lips twitched, a rare sign of satisfaction. He opened the notebook, scanning the page Saul described, then passed it to Kramer, who chewed his cigar and frowned. "This is evidence, Wolfe, but it's circumstantial." "You're saying Crane's running a blackmail scheme?" "Not blackmail," Wolfe corrected, leaning back. "A calculated betrayal. Mr. Crane designed the flaw in the Civic Center blueprints, not as a fail-safe for Mr. Vance, but as a commodity. He intended to sell it to Mr. Heller, allowing Pinnacle Designs to expose the flaw and secure the contract. Miss Starr, aware of the scheme, threatened to go public, so Mr. Crane manipulated Mr. Heller into silencing her. Heller's face reddened, his fists clenching. "That's a lie. I didn't—" "Quiet," Kramer snapped, his eyes on Wolfe. "Go on?" Wolfe continued, unruffled. "The key, entrusted to Miss Starr, unlocked a safe containing the blueprint fragment, the proof of the flaw. Mr. Crane spread rumors of his own death to vanish, planning to sell the full blueprints elsewhere. But he miscalculated. Mr. Heller, fearing exposure, killed Miss Starr and took the fragment, unaware that Mr. Crane still holds the original plans Vance broke in, his voice shrill. "You're saying Crane set me up? He's my partner." "Your partner," Wolfe said, his tone cutting. "Saw you as a means to an end. His ambition outstripped yours. But you, Mr. Vance, are not blameless. Your silence about the flaw enabled this conspiracy." Clara, silent until now, spoke, her voice trembling. "Crane told me he was leaving the country. Said he had a buyer in Chicago. I didn't know about Starr until it was too late." Wolfe's eyes fixed on her. "Miss Clara, you are complicit, knowingly or not. You aided Mr. Crane by hiding the key, and you went to the archive to retrieve the fragment for your own ends." She flinched, tears welling. "I was scared. Heller threatened me." "Enough," Heller growled, lunging to his feet. Kramer's hand shot out, pinning him back to the chair. Wolfe raised a hand, silencing the room. "The final piece is Mr. Crane's location. He is not dead, as Miss Clara believes. He is hiding, waiting for his moment. Archie, you found evidence of his presence at the warehouse, did you not?" I nodded, recalling the goon's conversation about waiting for Crane. "Saul's photos and the notebook confirm he's been there. And the bartender at the Rusty Anchor said Crane was talking about betrayal days ago." Wolfe turned to Saul. "Mr. Panzer, you followed Mr. Heller to the warehouse and the Regent Hotel. Any sign of Mr. Crane?" Saul shook his head. "Not yet, but the goons at the warehouse mentioned a meet tonight. Could be him." Wolfe's eyes gleamed. "Then we shall force his hand. Archie, go to the warehouse tonight with Mr. Panzer. If Mr. Crane appears, detain him. Inspector, I suggest you have men nearby." Discreetly, Kramer scowled, but nodded. "If this blows up, Wolfe, you're answering for it." The meeting broke up, Vance and Clara escorted out by Saul, Heller, under Kramer's watchful eye. I called Saul to coordinate our warehouse stakeout, my pulse quickening at the prospect of nabbing Crane. Wolfe, sipping a fresh beer, returned to the notebook, his fingers tracing Crane's cryptic notes. "RT," he mused. "A new player, perhaps the buyer in Chicago. We must be prepared for surprises, Archie." I grabbed my coat and .38, the weight familiar and reassuring. The warehouse was a powder keg, and Crane, if he showed, would be the spark. As I stepped into the afternoon, the city's pulse thrummed around me, Horns, shouts, the clatter of a newsstand. The storm was breaking, and I was ready to ride it. That night, Saul and I crouched behind crates across from the warehouse, the Hudson's briny scent mixing with the tang of rust. The goons were there, smoking, their voices low. At 10 p.m., a figure approached, lean, hooded, moving like a man who knew he was hunted. Saul signaled, and we closed in, silent as ghosts. It was Crane, his face haggard, but unmistakable. He froze as my .38 pressed into his back. "Don't move, Crane," I said. "Wolfe wants a word." He didn't resist, his shoulders slumping. Saul cuffed him, and we hauled him to the brownstone, Kramer's men tailing us at a distance. The hidden player was caught, but I knew Wolfe would want the final act played out in his office, with all the pieces on the board. Chapter 10. The Final Blueprint. The brownstone on West 35th Street glowed softly in the late October night, its windows casting a warm defiance against the cold mist that had settled over Manhattan. It was just past midnight, October 1952, and the office was a stage set for the final act of our case. Leonard Crane, haggard and cuffed, sat in a yellow chair, his eyes darting like a trapped animal's. Saul Panzer stood by the door, his lean frame a quiet threat. I, Archie Goodwin, leaned against my desk, my .38 holstered but ready, while Nero Wolfe presided from his custom chair, a beer in hand, his bulk an anchor in the room's charged atmosphere. Inspector Kramer had been called, and Harold Vance, Marcus Heller, and Clara were on their way, summoned for Wolfe's grand denouement. Crane's capture at the warehouse had been the break we needed, but the puzzle wasn't complete. The blueprints, the flaw, the key, Evelyn Starr's murder, all pointed to Crane as the architect of a conspiracy that had spiraled into betrayal and bloodshed. Wolfe's eyes, sharp as a draftsman's pen, fixed on Crane, who squirmed under the scrutiny. "Mr. Crane," Wolfe began, his voice a low rumble that filled the room, "you have orchestrated a scheme of remarkable audacity. The deliberate flaw in the Civic Center blueprints was your creation, designed not to secure your firm's contract, but to sell its secret for profit. You manipulated Mr. Heller, used Miss Starr, and betrayed Mr. Vance. Now, you will confess." Crane's jaw tightened, but his defiance crumbled under Wolfe's gaze. "You've got it wrong," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I didn't kill anyone." "Perhaps not directly," Wolfe said, leaning back, the chair creaking. "But your actions set the stage. Begin with the flaw. Why?" Crane licked his lips, his eyes flicking to the door. "It was leverage." Vance was too cautious, wanted to play it safe with the city. I saw a way to make millions. The flaw, a weak foundation joint, would collapse without specific corrections. I hid the details in a safe at the archive, accessible only with a key. I figured we could charge the city to fix it, or sell the secret to Pinnacle. "And you chose the latter," Wolfe said, his tone cutting. "You approached Mr." Heller Crane nodded, his shoulders slumping. "Heller was hungry for the contract. I offered him the blueprint secret for a cut. He'd expose the flaw, discredit Vance, and Pinnacle would take over. I gave the key to Evelyn Starr, told her it was proof of Vance's incompetence to get her on my side. I leaned forward, catching a thread. But Starr wasn't buying it. She was going to the mayor. Crane's face darkened. She figured it out, said she'd expose the whole deal, ruin us all. I told Heller she was a problem. I didn't know he'd kill her. The doorbell rang, and I let in Vance, Heller, and Clara, escorted by Kramer, whose cigar was already fouling the air. Heller's face was a mask of fury. Vance looked like a man awaiting execution, and Clara's eyes were red, her hands trembling. They took seats, the room now a pressure cooker ready to burst. Wolfe continued, his voice unrelenting. "Mr. Heller, you killed Miss Starr to protect your deal with Mr. Crane. You retrieved the key from her at the archive, then used it to access the blueprint fragment in the safe." Heller lunged forward, but Kramer's hand clamped his shoulder. "I didn't shoot her," Heller shouted. "Crane set me up. He said Starr had the key, told me to get it. When I got there, she was already dead." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "A convenient claim. Miss Clara, you were at the archive that night, seeking the same fragment. Why?" Clara's voice was barely audible. "Crane told me to get it, said it'd protect me from Heller. I didn't know Starr was dead until I saw her. I ran." Wolfe turned to Vance. "And you, Mr." Vance concealed the flaw's existence, enabling this conspiracy. "Your silence made you complicit." Vance's hands shook as he gripped his briefcase. "I didn't know Crane was selling us out. I thought the flaw was our insurance to keep the city dependent on us." Wolfe sipped his beer, his eyes gleaming. "The final piece is RT, noted in Mr. Crane's notebook. A buyer in Chicago, perhaps? Mr. Crane, enlighten us." Crane's head snapped up, panic in his eyes. "There's no RT. I made it up to throw Heller off. I was going to take the blueprints and disappear." Kramer snorted. "Nice story, Wolfe, but it's thin. Where's the proof?" Wolfe gestured to Saul, who produced the notebook and photos. "These, Inspector, document Mr. Crane's scheme. The blueprint fragment, annotated in his hand, confirms the flaw's design. His confession seals it." Crane broke, his voice a sob. "All right, I planned it all. The flaw, the deal with Heller, giving Starr the key. But I didn't kill her. Heller must have—" Heller roared, lunging again, but Kramer's men restrained him. "You lying rat," Heller shouted. "You set me up." Wolfe raised a hand, silencing them. "Mr. Heller, you fired the shot. The gun, found in your hotel room, will match the bullet in Miss Starr. Mr. Crane, you are guilty of conspiracy and incitement. Mr. Vance, your negligence is a lesser crime, but a crime nonetheless." Kramer stood, signaling his men. "I'm taking them all in." "Wolfe, you'd better be right." As Kramer's men cuffed Crane and Heller, Wolfe turned to Vance. "You'll have your blueprints back, corrected. See to it they are flawless." Vance nodded, pale and shaken. Clara, escorted out, looked back at me, her eyes pleading, but I had no answers for her. The office emptied, leaving Wolfe and me in the quiet, the storm spent. "Well done, Archie," Wolfe said, sipping his beer. "A case concluded." Though not without cost, I poured a whiskey, grinning. "You pulled it off, boss." Crane's the architect, Heller's the muscle, and Vance gets to rebuild. Wolfe grunted, reaching for his book. "The orchids await, and dinner, I trust, will be exceptional." As I typed up the final notes, the brownstone settled into its familiar rhythm, but the city's shadows held more secrets, waiting for the next case to call us back.